I'm Sue Morgan, Executive Director and Acting Joint CE at Design Council. For the second year running, we're really pleased to be headline sponsors for the Festival of Place and the Pineapple Awards. Our experience and research shows that well-designed neighbourhoods and places have a transformative impact. The spaces between buildings, the blue and the green in the grey, creating fantastic places to live. This is why we are pleased and excited to sponsor the awards for excellent placemaking and place design at the Pineapple Awards this year. Please join us to celebrate the role design can play in helping us live more happy, healthier and sustainable lives.
Welcome to the second half of the Future Place category as part of the Pineapples Awards, sponsored by the Design Council. We've already heard presentations about future places, about Mayfield in Manchester, Beam Park in Raynham, and Soapworks in Bristol. And in this second half of the Future Place category, we'll hear from three more projects who are vying for the Golden Pineapple. That's Brent Cross Town, which is going to be presented by Argent's Nick Searle, joint managing partner of Argent and a partner of Argent Related. We're going to hear about Union Terrace Gardens from LDA Designs' Kirsten Taylor, director there. And we're going to hear about Winstanley and York Road Regeneration with HDA Designs' Simon Bayliss, managing partner, and Lucy Smith, a partner. And I really am so grateful to our judging panel who are going to be joining us today to ask some questions of our candidates. So that's Ben Adams, founder of Ben Adams Architects. We've got Aisling Ramshaw, head of sales and marketing at CEG. We've got Sarah Jones-Morris, director of the Landsmith Associates. And we've got Mike Saunders, CEO of Commonplace. And a big thanks to Design Council. They've supported this awards from their inception and helped us with some of the criteria that the judges have done so far. They've reviewed all of these projects and their submissions and marked them according to the Design Council's criteria. And then this is kind of our final part where the candidates, the shortlisted candidates, are coming in here to present their projects, and the judges have a chance to quiz them about their ambition and vision for these future places. So without further ado, I'm going to invite Nick Searle to join us on the stage, and he's going to present. Fantastic. Hello, welcome.
Hello.
Good to see you. I'm going to disappear. If you're all set and you want to share your screen, I'm going to disappear and reappear in your 10th minute.
Okay.
Okay, good luck.
Thank you. Well, look, thank you very much, Christine. It's great to be here. I'm here to talk to you about Brent Cross Town, which is in North London, best known probably for Brent Cross Shopping Centre, the first out-of-town shopping centre that was built in the country back in the 1970s. We obviously, this is a huge project. We've called it Brent Cross Town for a reason, because it is a town. It is of that scale, and I think we really wanted to get that across. I also want to get across throughout the whole of what I'm going to say here, that this is all about partnerships. If there's something that we have learned over our 40-year history, is that the developer is not the master of the universe. We are very much one member of a team of people and a group of partnerships that have to come together. And this starts with the fact that this is being developed by Argent Related, as opposed to Argent. That's our own partnership, UK partnership for this project and many others. It's also a partnership with Barnet Council. And they have been fantastic partners, and they are utterly committed to what we're trying to achieve, both as a council and also as joint venture partners in the project itself. So the project sits just to the south of the existing Brent Cross shopping centre. It's 180 acres in scale, 50 acres of which are parks and playing fields. There's over 10 million square feet of development, and these are just kind of the facts around it. I think the most important two elements of this are initially the fact that we're going to deliver between 6,500 and 7,000 homes, but we're also going to deliver offices for 25,000 people. And the importance of that is it gives us a daytime economy. And it means that all of the ground floor experience that we place so much importance on, all of the retail, all of the other experiential activities that happen there, have a daytime economy. And that is absolutely critical. And I'll talk a little bit more about some of the social infrastructure that's coming with this, but you can just see in the list of things there that there are 3 schools that exist on the site. They're all being replaced as part of this. As we always do, we start these projects by thinking and talking and writing rather than drawing. And we created the handbook about 3 years ago. The project was called Brent Cross South at the time, and we created some city-making principles, designed and built for people. There is no end product, right infrastructure in early, part of something bigger than itself, and everyone is welcome. And what we've been doing over the last 3 years is developing specific strategies and targets and ambitions which deliver on all of those city-making principles. So this is not about just writing down some vague ambitions. This is about actually setting out metrics that lead us essentially to a health and wellness strategy for the whole development in every aspect of what we're going to do. And going, we haven't got time to go through all of that in detail today, but what we have done is we've set out 4 key pledges or promises where we are going to focus our attention, and we're going to deliver the majority of those strategies through these 4 pledges. And the first one is to take advantage of the fact that we have a 44-acre playing field as part of the master plan area, utterly unique, very unusual to be given this opportunity. When we got involved in 2015, we already had a planning permission here, which allowed for sports facilities to be on the playing fields. We've now developed that significantly, and we are developing partnerships, firstly, as you can see here, with Women in Sport, but also with a number of governing bodies and other sports associations to build a really inclusive park and playing fields. Very important that we say the word park in there, because this will not be a place that's just about sport. It will also be a place where you can come. But it's all about getting people active, getting people involved, whether that be people who are going to live there in the future, people who live there now, or people who will be visiting. We've also looked, and as we always do, I mentioned, talking about the nature of the place that we're trying to create. We can talk about retail, we can talk about leisure, we can talk about all of these things, but actually what we found at King's Cross was that we had to look retrospectively to measure the social value that we had created there. Now, we've managed to do it, but it was difficult because we hadn't created a baseline. We hadn't done the research to underpin it at the outset. What we are doing here is we are creating an index for ourselves, a flourishing index. We're working with Bureau Happold and the University of Manchester right now to create the baselines of what is currently happening in and around the site, whether it be environmental factors or human factors. And we will use that as the baseline to then measure ourselves and measure responses to what we're doing over time, probably over a 15 to 20 year period. So this is all about us taking this very seriously and not just using CGIs and generalizations to talk about this. And this just kind of illustrates some of that point. There's a lot of talk about the 15-minute town concept here. And again, rather than diving straight into what will the retail layouts be, we look very carefully. This is what we're looking at here is the first phase of the development, the area between the new station, which is a new station that's being delivered as part of the development and linking to the, it's on the Thameslink line. Looking at this area and looking at a heat map of activity and experiences as you move around on the ground floor of that space. which underpins the experience of what it will be to live there, work, or indeed visit. The third of our pledges is about connectivity. And as I say, we are building a new station as part of this, so we will be connected into and out of London. But more importantly, in many ways than that, we're also very focused on local walking and cycling networks. The site is currently surrounded on 3 sides by major transport infrastructure, and local communities at the moment can't get into use, particularly that large green space. So getting across those spaces and making those areas accessible is going to be really, really critical. And of course, once they get there, we want to make sure that the spaces that we've created are fabulous, and particularly the connection to nature and using those green spaces that we've been blessed with. The fourth pledge is around net zero carbon. This is very challenging. We've set down some very significant targets for ourselves. And to start us on that process, we have employed Vattenfall, who have taken up a 47-year concession agreement on the project, and they are delivering all of the energy services that we will be providing through our on-site energy centre. As part of that, we are delivering the largest air-sourced heat pumps in the whole of Europe. But it's not just about operation. I think everybody now recognises that embodied carbon is really where this is at, and we are focused heavily on how we use timber and other low carbon materials in the construction of our buildings. So that is the fourth critical pledge that we are making, and of course that feeds into not just the buildings themselves, but it will also feed into enabling the people who live and work there to actually live low carbon lives themselves, and helping to deliver that through a digital strategy that makes that simpler, that improves the experience of people's lives when they're there. And just to finish up on this, we are also, we've done an awful lot of work. A lot has happened in the last 6 to 9 months, which has changed the environment in which we are doing this. I think generally we feel that what we were already doing actually fitted into the world that we think, and most people seem to think that we will be merging into as we come out of the pandemic. But we've gone out and we've done our own research on this, and we worked firstly with a group of about 25 professionals to see what really important areas of research we should be focusing on, and the 4 that you see there on the right hand side are where we focused our attention. We then went out and interviewed 3,000 UK residents to get their feedback on this, and we're then using this information to feed into and underpin both the pledges and the work that we will actually be doing. At the moment we're just starting on site with the infrastructure. And as part of that, we've been going through the consultation processes over the last year or 2. We've prepared a community, we've invoked a community fund, which has been supporting local people. And we're really pleased that we've just opened the first on-site presence there, which is this exploratory play park, where we have a small workspace alongside it where members of our staff work, and people can drop in, or at least they will be able to drop in when we're allowed to have them drop in. But this has already proved incredibly popular, and we're already showing how we're having a very significant impact on the lives of people who live nearby, and they're raising the questions already around that connectivity point that I was making. A lot of people are having to drive right now, and we want to reduce that. So that's what we're doing. We're building Brent Cross Town. We're incredibly excited about it. It's going to take 10, 15 plus years to do, and 10 minutes is nowhere near enough time to tell you all about it. But I hope I've given you an insight, not into the place itself, but what is really important to us as we take it forward.
Brilliant. Thanks so much, Nick. I'm going to invite your judges, if you want to unshare your screen. They're going to join us on stage now.
We'll do that.
Hi, Nick, and
hi,
thanks.
Ben.
Really good and brief presentation. I know it's a giant project in a short amount of time. Two things. I was really encouraged to hear your 4 pledges. I think it's a really exciting way of starting a project like this, just to set your stall out and kind of go public with this stuff, rather than starting with drawings and renders and, you know, more conventional means. But the question I had is that Parktown immediately made me think of Garden City and Ebenezer Howard and 120 years ago, and that was all about moving out of London and making ideal communities elsewhere. And this seems to be a sort of reinvention of that for the centre of town. I just wondered what your kind of take on Garden City, Parktown. You know, what have we learned in 120 years? How can we do it better?
Yeah, you're absolutely right, and that has been, you know, we've had exactly that debate. And I think what we're really focusing on here is that, firstly, the term town has kind of been lost in the lexicon of London. It's still there, Camden Town, Canning Town, all the rest of it, but we don't actually think of them as towns. They're now districts within the city. And what we had the opportunity to do here was to actually create an identifiable and understandable scale of development through the word town. And I think people get that. There's also something interesting about a town in the sense that you feel you can belong to it because it's not too big. If you're a neighbourhood in the city, we had a big debate over King's Cross over whether or not you belonged to King's Cross. And of course, you kind of don't, you do and you don't. It's part of the city and people are flowing backwards and forwards. I think that this town is in a different geography. It has a different kind of identity relative to the rest of London. And I think that's part of what we were trying to do. I think the notion of the park town, you know, it's kind of obvious. We've got 50 acres of park sitting right as part of it. And I think it gave us the opportunity to talk about a town, but also to talk about the nature of this particular town and the opportunity that we have through the green space that comes with it. So, you know, that was, you know, we could get a lot more, delve into the theory and the academic side of it. But, you know, in essence, that's what we're trying to get across, is scale and opportunity of connection with green spaces while you're still in London.
I thought it was a really interesting approach to the actual process you're going through, because I think that's one of the big challenges. There's a lot of focus on the design, but the process is equally, if not more important. So the things I was interested in hearing was, are there areas that you've been looking at in terms of sort of thriving areas for wildlife and nature to sort of coexist? Because obviously you've got a lot of public space and parks, etc. But what's going to sort of create differences in character and identity, and, you know, in terms of those different areas? And just to throw one other aspect, is a key thing that's coming up a lot now at the moment is about maintenance. And I was just interested in knowing what your thoughts are about how you're going to maintain those public spaces and parks.
Yeah, no, so there's a number of things in there. So the first thing that we've done is that we have taken the city-making principles brief and the values, and we went to Gillespie's actually, and we said we want to think about a public realm framework for this place, and that framework must not be articulated in landscape design terms. It must be articulated through the values of and the city-making principles that we're trying to underpin this place with. So through that came, I mean, gosh, this is a half an hour discussion on its own. Through this came a framework of a diversity of different kinds of spaces and different opportunities. We laid a green framework over it. We laid a mobility framework over it. We overlaid, seriously, we have overlaid a music and sound strategy layer onto it and said, how does sound and music actually play a part in all of this? And that's really, really critical. We have got a 20-page sound and music strategy now, which we're applying to all of the buildings and all the public spaces. And part of the, I'm sorry, I'm giving you all that to come back to the point that one of those is then, how does the relationship between people and nature work in these different areas? And there are some areas where kind of, you know, the focus is on the sport, the play and the activity, and some which are focused much more on those quiet spaces where actually it's more focused around your relationship with nature, with quiet space, with green space. You know, you're not going to get foxes and deer running through there, but you know, there is an opportunity for us to encourage more biodiversity in some of those in some parts of those green spaces, and also on the green spaces on the buildings and those kinds of things. So that's been really important. The second thing is, maintenance and management is a really, really important issue. At the moment, that large playing field it's council owned, it's metropolitan open land. So the first thing is that it's quite a unique opportunity to be given the chance to actually use the word develop very carefully in this sense. We're not developing it in a property sense, but to develop all of these facilities on metropolitan open land in this way. And so we are looking at a combination of what role does the council still need to play in that? What role do we as a developer and all of the people who are paying service charges for us play in that? And that's a debate. We haven't got, you will have noticed that one of the city making principles is ever evolving. And that is one of the principles here, is that you don't have all the answers on day one. You just don't. I mean, King's Cross, we are 15 years into this. We are still finding stuff out. We're still renewing. We're still changing, because the context around us is changing all the time. And that is what you have to do on big projects. You have to evolve as things go along. So I suspect our thinking on this will change. We are also talking to sports clubs. We're talking to certain sports clubs who may want to be able to use certain, you know, have year-long contracts to actually use some of the facilities. So we know that there will be income with certain sporting clubs and those kinds of things. So you have to create some kind of income in there without actually creating a situation where it becomes overly commercialized. So how do you
Nick,
get
I love your enthusiasm, but your answers are too long. You're going to run out of time.
Sorry.
That is passion. I'm going to channel your passion. Aisling, I'm going to ping to you.
These are big questions.
I know.
Hi, Nick. Thank you for that. Really great project. I love the City Making Handbook. You've clearly set out a strong vision from the start. What do you see as your sort of biggest challenge? It's obviously a long-term project over the next 10, 15 years. What do you see as your biggest challenge in the coming years to be able to ensure that you deliver on the vision and ensure it's viable?
Well, the biggest challenge right now is that we are in the middle of a global health pandemic, and it's probably going to turn into an economic recession. Let's see how it works out, but a challenging economic period. So you know, that is exactly what happened at King's Cross. Year one was the global financial crisis. So you know, we've kind of been here before, and we think we can find our way through that. You know, so that's going to be a significant challenge. I think your question was what's going to prevent us, you know, what's the challenge to getting it done? I think the biggest challenge actually of doing it is, how do we do it in such a way that we don't alienate all of the local people who are there right now? And that is the biggest challenge with these projects. We go and talk to them about all the benefits that they're bringing, and they tell us all about the things that are going to, you know, spoil their lives. So, you know, trying to avoid a long answer to the question again, I think one of our biggest challenges is making sure that we take local people with us on this. And I'm not going to claim we're perfect on that at the moment, by the way. We do our consultations, we do this, but there's a lot of people who still criticize us because we don't do enough. And we have to listen to that, and every time we have to learn from it. That I think is probably the biggest single challenge that keeps me awake at night is how do I not end up in a situation where I have something that some people love and local people just kind of resent.
Okay, Mike, briefly.
Thanks, Nick. I was really interested in your flourishing index, and my question was about how much of that, and it actually links to your previous answer, how much of that is objective measure and how much of that is subjective measure. So how you kind of, how are you going to collect what the sentiment of the local community is as you go through it?
Yeah. So I'm not the person with the PhD who's going to run the process out of Manchester University. So I haven't got the exact science and data for you, but I think most of it actually has to be quantitative data as far as we possibly can get it, because otherwise it's so easily challengeable in the future. Inevitably, some of it is going to be, and part of flourishing is how do you feel? And, you know, only 19% of people in this country, when you ask them if they think they're living a flourishing life, only 19% answer yes. And so there is a subjectivity in asking the people a question: do you feel that you are leading a thriving, flourishing, whatever you want to use, life? There's going to be subjectivity in their answer due to their personal circumstances. But I think what we will do is we will see themes that come out of that through their answers and exactly where they live and what they're experiencing, particularly in the early stages of what we're trying to do around them.
Nick, that was a really great
Pleasure.
presentation, and really, and thank you to the judges. I'm going to send you all away now and bring up our next presenter.
Okay.
So.
Bye.
Bye. So, a challenge to keep to time, but a reminder that succinctness is golden and difficult when we have such passion, such big projects, and so little time. It's my pleasure to welcome up to the stage Kirsten Taylor from LDA Design, who's going to present Union Terrace Gardens. You want to turn on your camera and microphone.
Hi.
Hello, brilliant to see you. So if you want to share your screen, I will appear at the 10th minute. And best of luck.
Sorry, I was hoping to go full screen. Go. Hi, yes, thanks very much. Delighted to be here today from LDA Design to talk about our projects in Aberdeen, which is Union Terrace Gardens. So Union Terrace Gardens is quite a landmark project for Aberdeen City Council. The site itself in the pictures here is surrounded by some of the city's finest architecture, and the gardens date back to 1878. So Union Terrace Gardens is one of Aberdeen's most important green spaces and one of Scotland's most central city parks. At times, the gardens have become a sort of magnet for antisocial behaviour. Dwindling kind of footfall has affected the vibrancy of the surrounding area, which is home to a lot of businesses within Aberdeen city centre. And the council's ambition was to really restore the gardens to create a revitalised cultural quarter, making the gardens a destination once more. It used to be a very popular space, but over the years it's declined, and it is slap bang in the middle of Aberdeen city centre. So the rejuvenation of Union Terrace Gardens formed a pilot project within the wider transformational city regeneration master plan. And the Union Terrace Gardens project is seen as the catalyst for a lot of the wider regeneration. So it's integral to another 50 projects identified within the city centre master plan. Plans for the gardens, for those who are not familiar with it, have been subject to intense public scrutiny, with a huge number of previous proposals having been put forward. and many of those rejected by the public. So there's been quite a controversial history to the project. So we knew that if we were going to turn this interest, which at times had been very negative, into a positive force for change, we knew that we needed to give people a voice. We really needed to tap into the collective imagination to inform the design, and we needed to build a groundswell of support for the project. So our starting point for developing the design was a very intensive programme of activation and engagement. To raise awareness of the project and the possibilities it held, thousands of Instagrams of the future cards were distributed within the city, depicting the possible future uses of the space. So these showed the gardens as how they could be used in future. So a central hub for events, as a space for community growing and for play, showing new small-scale commercial activities, as a centre of horticulture, arts and technology, all within the historic park setting. And a high-impact active reclamation launched the engagement process. So we worked with artist Nadfly to create 200 brightly coloured flags that carried illustrations of parts of Union Terrace Gardens. And these were placed throughout the gardens to be claimed by delighted visitors. So this served to really re-engage people with the gardens and also to symbolise their ownership of the space. Hands-on planning workshops, one-to-one design meetings, a 10-day winter festival public exhibition and an online survey which collected 1,400 responses followed. And overall, I think we engaged with about 6,000 people within the city. And in each instance, we were really tailoring our approach and trying to make it as diverse and interesting as possible. So we enabled different stakeholders to engage in a meaningful way with the design elements. So building on the principles of the Aberdeen City Centre Master Plan, we derived a set of objectives through the engagement process. So stakeholders really wanted the proposals to deliver the creation of a preserved and enhanced green space. So that included retention of the valued existing trees within the site and also new biodiverse rich planting. Creation of new and improved facilities, which included play, community growing, education, toilet provision and food and beverage opportunities. Celebration of the existing heritage, so repairing and reinstating existing heritage features within the gardens. Creation of flexible community event space of a range of different scales. Creation of an accessible gardens for all, introducing new, fully accessible routes into and around the gardens, and creation of a safe and active space. So providing new facilities to increase activity and footfall, and also improving safety with new lighting. So our proposals received really strong public support, which is indicated in the table on the slide. And that included 95% support for the improvements we made to accessibility. And the council unanimously approved the detailed planning application, describing the plans as a vision shaped by the people. An Aberdeen City Council spokesperson said, progressing a new design meant persuading people that their voice mattered. The LDA design chose to first listen to key stakeholders to gain an understanding of the issues, typified their empathetic approach, one that carried through into the design itself. The very high approval rating for the emergent design reflected the very high level of engagement with disparate groups. Our proposals focus therefore on restoring the Victorian gardens to create a relevant contemporary park for Aberdeen, a green heart for the Granite City that strengthens the connection between people and place. The design will see the gardens feel safer with new lighting and facilities, including a series of new formal and informal play areas, an arboretum garden walk for learning, play and leisure, including sculpture and feature lighting, and a community garden space for growing. Creating a more equitable place was a key driver, along with improving health and well-being and addressing social isolation. The plans therefore create an equitable space that will benefit all citizens and visitors to the city. To achieve designs that work for all ages and abilities, a range of more accessible routes into the garden were developed in close consultation with leading disability and access groups. The proposals had to carefully balance respecting and enhancing the existing natural assets and existing trees within the site, with making the space much more usable, enjoyable and accessible. It includes the construction of new bridge and elevated walkway structures and a new accessible walkway route which carves an amphitheatre for events. The chair of the Disability Equity Partnership described the plans as one of the very best examples of inclusive design that she'd seen, making the gardens an experience for everyone regardless of their physical ability. And the new designs enhance existing heritage features, balancing restoration with contemporary intervention and new uses. 3 new buildings sit alongside existing Grade A heritage features, creating new business opportunities for a thriving day-to-evening economy. These include a new cafe kiosk, transformation of Grade A listed Victorian toilets into a new bar and restaurant space, forming one of the main entrance points from Union Street, the main retail street in Aberdeen, and the refurbishment of the garden's arches as gallery and exhibition space. So these new commercial and cultural uses will draw in visitors, bringing associated benefits to local businesses, increasing tourism, contributing to land and property values, and attracting further inward investment to the city centre. The success of the project also rests on improving accessibility and connectivity within the wider city. So to further enhance the project, LDA Design assisted the council in obtaining funding to support the review of wider improvements to connectivity between the gardens, key transport links, other cultural, civic and retail destinations. Proposals were developed which would see improvements that encourage active travel, making streets safer and more accessible for pedestrians and cyclists, promoting the use of underused areas and thoroughfares to help to diversify the experience of the city centre, and enhancing existing townscape and character areas to aid wayfinding. So this strategy really sets the gardens within an improved citywide walking and cycling network, with proposals for the gardens providing shared cycle and pedestrian routes that are generous in width, well signposted, overlooked, and reflective of desire lines to other key city centre destinations. The proposals for the gardens also include junction safety improvements to adjoining streets and adding cycle parking, water fountains, and a bike repair station to help promote sustainable transport choices in the city. The gardens also play a key part in contributing environmental benefits to the wider urban context, improving the quality of green infrastructure within the city as a whole. Improved biodiversity and flood defence provides climate resilience, and the 3 new proposed buildings will feature seed and planted green roofs and rainwater harvesting. Sustainable urban drainage will manage the surface water runoff, and the planting scheme builds in bioresilience, including diverse species in order to withstand future disease. LED lighting reduces energy use, and specialist soil improvement techniques boost carbon capture to improve the air quality and reduce the impact of emissions in the city. On the whole, the scheme is constructed from high quality, sustainably sourced materials, and the gardens are really built to last. The project is currently under construction on site and is due to complete next year, and we really feel it will deliver a legacy that to the city that supports its future social, economic and environmental growth. Thank you.
Oh, I'm reappearing, but we appear to have lost Kirsten for a moment. Can other people see? Oh, there you are. You're back. Oh, good. Hi, do you have a wrap up? Was that your ending sentence, or do you want to wrap up with a sentence?
Yeah, no, just thank you very much for the opportunity to present our project. We think it's going to be a really valuable addition to the city of Aberdeen, and we're looking forward to seeing it built next year. It's currently under construction, and yeah.
Brilliant, thanks. I'm good. If you want to unshare your screen, I'm going to invite your judges up. All right. And actually, as I'm bringing other people, Ashley, do you want to kick off as everyone's joining?
Hi, Kirsten. Thanks very much for that. It's great. I love that shot that you put up. It reminded me actually of Edinburgh's Princess Street Gardens,
Yeah,
the Victorian style. You mentioned improving security because it's quite an antisocial sort of space, or has become one. You mentioned lighting. What else are you doing to sort of get rid of that bad behaviour and improve the security?
Yeah, I think really the idea behind the master plan, including some of the building uses, was about increasing that activity and footfall. Also by using the desire lines and creating new accessible routes through the gardens, they're kind of linking, making the gardens the sort of desire line route through, so you're connecting to things like the existing gallery. So we're hoping that the kind of just general increase in footfall and activation and overlooking of the restaurant, bar and gallery uses. So they're going to be obviously lit in the evening, and there'll be hopefully increased uptake in footfall, which is all just going to contribute to increasing the safety, as well as like a really effective lighting scheme.
Thank you. Thanks, Christine. Thanks, Kirsten. Really interesting. I love the kind of historical context. I love the inclusivity of your community engagement. I thought that was wonderful. So for me, I think my main question is, so in 10 years time, let's say this kind of Future Places is completed and embedded, what is the kind of one thing that you would be able to point to say this has been a success?
I think that what we're hoping is going to be the big success is just the flexibility of the space. One of the key things that came through engagement was the number of community groups who would like to hold events in the city. And, you know, as often happens in cities, it's kind of bigger organised commercial events which kind of take precedence. So we've created opportunities where those large scale events can take place, but there's also a full range of different types of smaller scale space where, for example, we've created such a water feature around an existing statue that you can drain down and becomes a stage. There's elevated walkways where you could have organised bands, and yeah, there's just a whole range of different kind of scales of spaces within the space that can be used in a whole range of different ways, hopefully. As well as actually a designated community garden space.
Brilliant, thank you.
Want to come in?
Hi, Kirsten. Thanks for your presentation. It was a lovely piece of restoration, renewal, and very sensitively handled, I think. And it did make me curious as a designer, I guess. Was there anything you ruled out? You know, was there an Eiffel Tower or an i360 that sort of started out and disappeared through the planning?
Yeah, well, interestingly, so we were, when we came to the project, it was part of the city centre master plan, and one of the big moves within that was a bridge across the gardens. But actually we just felt it was a kind of bold move that connected another street to Union Terrace, but actually just kind of passed over the gardens. It didn't necessarily connect people into the gardens, and we just felt it was kind of a lot of spend for not a lot of benefit. And for us, the accessibility was dealt with in much more sensitive ways, and it was important for us to create actually direct access into the gardens. So we do have elevated kind of walkways because the gardens is on a number of terrace levels, but those concentrated on connecting one level to another, as opposed to a grand sort of old iconic bridge that was part of the original master plan vision. So that quite quickly came out for us once we started the engagement process.
Sorry, that's my job to reroute, but I wanted to bring Sarah, I wanted to bring you in now.
Hi there. The great presentation. It was really interesting to see again how it's evolved. The process of restoration is always a tricky one, because to preserve or conserve or to change and sort of challenge people's thinking about it, particularly there's so many Victorian style parks. So I was interested in your thoughts about what you felt was unique and brought identity to this park, because one of the issues with a lot of parks like this is that they become quite homogenous and generic. So what do you feel that was really pulls that identity of that area into the park itself?
Yeah, it is quite a unique space, and as you said, it's quite similar to Princess Street Gardens in Edinburgh, so it had a lot of the same issues, but it is really unique in terms of how it's terraced. So there's kind of 3 levels to the park, which makes it quite unique, and there's obviously a lot of existing heritage features, and one of those was the kind of arches, and they're in a kind of mid-terrace level, and that's where we're creating gallery space. So, well, some of the arches will be seating, external seating with like covered seating areas, and some will be gallery and exhibition space, which kind of link to as part of the walking route from the station to the main art gallery in Aberdeen. So I think the kind of the levels are really unique. There's obviously a lot of mature vegetation and a lot of built heritage features that did make it really stand out. I think its location is quite unique as well. It's like very, very central in Aberdeen.
The observations.
I've already had one. I think that if we've got a few more seconds, I think the other question I had was about the community engagement that you did, and you mentioned inclusivity, particularly people with different physical needs, and I just wondered, of the kind of 6,000 people who were involved, whether you'd managed to get a kind of representative sample of the whole of the city's population.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, we did quite a bit of outreach with schools and special needs education facilities. We worked very, very closely with the Disability Equality panel, and also the Bon Accord Access panel in Aberdeen. So they helped us with a lot of outreach with people with different needs. We also engaged with all of the community council forum, so they were a real conduit for us to kind of filtering messages to and from all of the community councils within the whole city, because it really was about engaging the whole city and not just the direct communities around the garden.
Thank you.
Does anyone have any further questions in our last minute? Sarah does. Go on.
Hi, just a very quick one. The other thing I was just touching upon is this contributing in any way to flood resilience within the city? Maybe something that I missed in the presentation. Would be interesting to see your thoughts.
Yeah, so we have all of the drainage within the gardens is sustainable urban drainage, and the buildings are have sedum green roofs. So yeah, there's all of the drainage systems are contributing to flood resilience.
Guys, to go back to attendees, and I'm going to invite up our next presenter. So thanks so much for that, Kirsten, and to the judges for your questions.
Right.
I love the wave. The waves are good. And our so our next presentation is on Winstanley and York Road regeneration. That's HDA Designs, Simon Bayliss, managing partner, and Lucy Smith, a partner. And this is actually going to be our last presentation in the Future Place category. We've had 5 other presentations so far. So very exciting. After this, the judges are going to be doing their deliberations. I'm going to, pardon me. I'm going to invite our presenters to stage now. And we've got two this time. So if you both want to unmute and join your camera. Hello, Simon.
Hello.
And here comes Lucy.
Hello.
Brilliant. Hello.
Hi.
Great. Well, I'm going to pass this over to you. I'm going to reappear in your 10th minute, whichever you is sharing. I'd ask you guys to unmute amongst yourselves. And I am going to vanish as you share your screen.
Do that. Can we all see that? I will take no response as an answer. We've brought a technical challenge for the very last presentation with two of us on the call. So hopefully that doesn't work against us. But we've also had the benefit of seeing some of the fantastic presentations go before us, so we can actually pick up some of the cues. We're here today to talk about the Winstanley and York Road estate regeneration. It's a large project adjacent to Clapham Junction, as you can see from this aerial photograph here. And we're going to talk about how the project really has developed towards its current position, which is with consent and a start on site, and the journey that's taken us to that place in creating really a whole new piece of city, or as Nick put it, really a town. The project that we're bringing forward will, when it's finished, deliver somewhere around 2,750 new homes, a civic leisure centre, workspace, nursery, and a wide range of other retail and communal facilities. The project will deliver about 40% of affordable homes. We expect it to be in excess of that. And fundamental to the project is its focus on open space, and particularly around health and well-being in an area which actually has suffered for many decades with quite high levels of deprivation. Obviously, that was before our current predicament of the last 6 months or so, but it seems particularly prescient that we should be pushing that agenda as hard as we can on this project. Jobs have been at the centre of the project, and I think it's pretty unusual to bring a project of this nature forward with a very equally balanced joint venture between a private and public sector partner, where both stand to benefit from each other's expertise and long-term patient investment.
So I'm just going to talk a little bit about the community engagement that we've done on site to start with, before Simon gets into the overall master plan and design of the project. So I run HTA's engagement and communications, which is all about, really for us, the user experience of places and how we communicate the places that we're designing to those residents, particularly existing residents. And we've spent the last 4 years working with the community at Winstanley to deliver a programme of innovative and participatory engagement as much as possible. So trying to make that as inclusive and as interesting as possible with the existing residents on the site. So we try and do that as much as possible with a programme of creative activities that run in parallel with the planning process. So throughout the programme of activities, when we came to engaging with the residents on the planning process, we consulted with just over 7,000 statutory consultees, but we also ran an additional 30 events that were not just sort of boards in a hall, traditional kind of engagement, but tried to really involve as many different groups from the community as possible. So we actually engaged with well over the 7,000 statutory consultees. We had only a handful of objections at planning, and none of those were from any existing tenants. So really for us, it's about getting as many people on board with the design process from the beginning as possible. So just a brief timeline of some of, and a couple of examples of some of those activities. So we try and make those boards in a hall consultations as engaging as possible. So the first image on there is a one-to-one flat plan that we printed up on a huge piece of vinyl and put on the floor in one of our exhibitions, so people can see where the furniture is going to be, how big the flat's going to be. We had people lying in the bath, sitting on the sofa, trying to get a feel of their space, and then an open and honest discussion with them about how we can improve that design process. We do lots of 3D modelling with residents so that they can see in sort of real spatial modelling how that's going to affect them. We've done a couple of the Get Active Battersea festivals with residents. So the June 2018 one, we actually made a scale model out of foam of the entire proposed new development, and worked with the local schools to get all of the kids to decorate the buildings with their dream balcony, their dream front door, and what that would look like. And then the kids all came to the event and climbed all over the model. We try and do as many sort of skills and development and learning projects as we can, particularly with education. And HTA have set up a social impact project called Beyond Boundaries. And we work with local authorities and community groups all over London. And at the end of 2018, we ran a Lego competition where we taught kids software, how to design and build using Lego, but also using the Lego software. So it's a sort of precursor to a sort of SketchUp or CAD way of designing. And it was a competition across boroughs. And then we've done various different projects, including a community woodworking project that we do called Assemble and Join, which is on site, where we get intergenerational learning with people coming in and designing and building using plywood and a CNC wood router. And we've worked with quite a few different community groups on site to deliver various different projects, including there's a local gym. We work with Chelsea pensioners on that as well. Just in terms of measuring our kind of social value on the project as well. Sorry, Si. We've been working with lots of the community groups for a long period of time, and we're trying to continue that even in this sort of COVID period. So we're planning for activities that people can do from home. So including interior design of the show flats for the first new blocks that are coming forward, and working with youth groups on that and how we might work with them, doing a distance training on interior design, and also working on things like wayfinding and legacy projects, and really reaching our audience through digital methods, but also printing brochures, booklets, and sending them out to residents so that we can still engage with them, even though we're all sort of distance and working from home.
So how's that fell into the master plan? Well, let's have a look at the site here. It's a huge area sandwiched between Clapham Junction and the River Thames, but it's a rather disparate collection of buildings built of multiple periods, different scales, different footprints, and different uses on the site. The open space is rather left over and rather poor quality. But that timeline that Lucy spoke about actually is predated by at least 5 years of engagement by the council to understand the residents' needs, and through that process determined that actually most of the people living within the red line boundary were pretty enthusiastic about redevelopment. So working with Levitt Bernstein, a master plan was prepared through 2013 to 2015, on which a joint venture procurement process was set out to find a private sector developer based on the red line proposed. We arrived at the project with Taylor Wimpey as our client and bid to Wandsworth Council and was successful in that. And since that period have developed a master plan, which this is the end result of that you see here, through a 3-year period, multiple engagement process with not just the local community, but with obviously the local planning authority, 4 design review panels, which ultimately turned into kind of quite informal and creative workshops to try and refine the best aspects of the project. And what you can see here is the diagrams to take those disparate sets of buildings and form them around the big set piece, which is this major park, a 2.5 hectare park at the centre of the scheme, pulled away from its existing location on the busy York Road and wrapped with buildings based around a mansion block typology with taller height towards the Thames to really optimise the value. Now, I suppose the simplicity of the master plan belies the complexity of the site, and although these are rather small, the phasing programme of rehousing, of stitching new buildings into an existing context of complex services and quite large buildings in some cases whilst rehousing the existing residents with a pledge that all could remain living in the area on the site, whilst forming this huge park in the centre of it, was no mean feat. And actually, the phasing and some of that rehousing challenge and the existing relocation of existing buildings was at the heart of ensuring that our project was deliverable and able to deliver on some of those significant promises that we set out at the beginning. And that park really did form that centrepiece and the backdrop for the buildings. And working with a Battersea typology of Battersea Park Road, the south side of Battersea Park, really defining what Battersea might mean to residents, which was completely absent in the existing site and the context. Interestingly, that to the south of the site, the Winstanley estate, the larger, wider Winstanley estate, actually has quite a modernist, coherent diagram to it. The buildings actually have a degree of consistency and some real design quality. And those residents really voted to remain as they are. And it's the haphazard nature of the York Gardens and part of the Winstanley estate that have been moved forward for redevelopment. So bringing some of that consistency, which is cherished and appreciated by the residents, bringing some of that modernity to the site with this focus on health, well-being and the large park. And just to note, the benefit of hearing Nick earlier, you can see that the build-to-rent building on the right-hand side of the bottom image, one of the innovative points of our proposal was to identify a number of flats within that building that would be ring-fenced for funding the maintenance, long-term maintenance of the park and some of the activities for the long run. So really looking after the stewardship of the place over the next 30 years, bearing in mind that the local authority would obviously retain ownership. Just to sort of finish up, really, we had 4 architects involved in the project, which brought huge diversity. We all worked fairly evenly and equally together to bring that richness, and I think that's really fed through into the final proposals, which gained consent in 2018 and started on site in 2019 with some of the first buildings hopefully due to be finished, possibly before the end of the year, but more likely next year.
Invite the judges now, and well done for wrapping up so eloquently as I appeared beside you. And I am Aisling, why don't you kick us off while I invite everyone?
Great, thank you very much. That was really interesting. Lucy, the community engagement events you've been doing are really imaginative. I just want to say fantastic, really great. My question, probably more for Simon, can you just explain again the people who are being rehoused or decamped out? Can you just, did you say they're all being rehoused, and has that been successful? You just sort of talk us through that process. I think you're on mute.
Obviously, we're at the very beginning stages of the process, but one of the innovations that we brought to the project was to identify 3 quite small sites, actually outside of the red line, where we demonstrated we could sort of surgically insert 3 buildings kind of ahead of the master plan. And so those are the buildings that are kind of coming forward now. There's a private housing tower and a small block of about 40 social rented homes with quite specific needs for local residents with quite specific needs. And in fact, a relocated church and school from the centre of the site. What that does is allow us kind of to get a bit of a momentum on the phase 1 redevelopment, but it kind of shows a statement of intent to the residents that, you know, the pledge for them to be able to stay on the estate if they desire, you know, is very much meant, but also the quality of the accommodation that's being delivered, it sort of speaks for itself in physical terms. So, I mean, it's interesting that when we've engaged in these projects over sort of decades now, quite often people, when given the opportunity, are quite happy to move off the estate. They're not particularly, they don't particularly feel committed to the area. So long as they can live within the borough, they're quite happy to take another offer and, if you like, avoid the disruption for the next few years. But actually, it's been interesting how many people through Lucy's engagement process have shown a commitment to the area and a keenness to stay locally. You know, it's a great spot. It's got great connections. It's got the river. It's just the housing quality is incredibly poor. So yeah, we've got the first residents due to be moving in probably in the new year, and I think that'll really help to kickstart the process. And we think a high proportion of people will stay locally.
Hi Simon, hi Lucy, and thanks for that presentation. I know it's a lot to cover in a short amount of time. We have to skate over it a little bit, but fantastic engagement process, and as has been said, an innovative one. I wanted to ask a slightly provocative question about Taylor Wimpey, and there is the commercial reality of this stuff. You know, it's great to hear from stakeholders and what they want, but you also face a client who has very real needs and commercial needs at the end of it. And what do you do with that? Those two things must come into conflict or tension at some point. How do you sort of work through that?
I mean, there is an inevitable tension, but I think that's kind of present in all forms of development, and particularly in forms of regeneration. And I would say, you know, it's not always been a smooth journey, but I would say the relationship between with Taylor Wimpey, their core team, and the council's team from the start, really through the dialogue process, was, I think, possibly the main reason why they were selected. You know, the vision that we had was incredibly bold and possibly a little bit too ambitious at the time for the council, because it involved quite a long way back to, you know, to really involve the community to sort of get behind a complete change in plan from what they'd been voting on previously. But I think the relationship and the trust that sort of seemed to be there present between Taylor Wimpey and Wandsworth was really powerful. And yeah, there's been there's a sort of constant tension that actually the design team is a consistent sort of voice in the process of actually being reasonably good at diffusing, which is kind of really understanding the desires and the needs of the residents and long-term needs of the council. We have to manage and maintain and look after against the real sort of stark commercial reality. And I would say I've actually been really impressed with Taylor Wimpey's commitment to doing you know, a really good job, to investing really heavily up front, and to keeping, you know, quite a balanced view about what's needed. You know, it helps as a great part of the city. It's a great site. So, you know, from a commercial point of view, it has a lot of things going for it. But I think I've been really, really pleased with how they've worked together.
Mike, I mean, you know a lot about community consultation, but I'm going to ping over to you with your questions.
Yeah, thanks, both of you. Yeah, Lucy, I mean, you know, I'm completely inspired by everything you've done over such a long period of time. I think it's incredible. The specific thing I was interested in was the bit around using the Lego and software and getting and also the kind of construction, getting the community to construct stuff. How much of that, to what extent was that kind of getting them on board with the principles and understanding of the process you're going through, and to what extent could you actually take anything that they did right into the master plan?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, lots of engagement is quite often seen as sort of just fun and distraction and things like that, but we try and do it so that we establish a meaningful conversation with them whilst we're doing those sort of creative activities, and it just means that we're offering more to more people. I think the Lego project in particular, we went to 10 different teams across different boroughs throughout the city, and we put 2 mentors into each team from HTA, generally a comms person and an architect, and we taught them the software, and then they built a sustainable house of the future out of Lego and also their digital modelling software. So we were trying to get them to learn stuff, practical skills as well. I wouldn't say any of the designs would make it into normal house types that we would then go on and develop as a practice, but the conversations that you have with some of those kids and then their parents who live on the estate as well, and they come in and they talk to you about what they're worried about, and you really start to build a relationship with them through projects like that. And we found that as an ongoing thing with a regen project of this length. You know, you're building Lego with kids now, but they're really your future audience in the next 10, 15 years when the development starts to, you know, be their new homes that they're looking to buy and move out from their parents' house. So it's about that long-term relationship for us, and really working very closely with the council to maintain that and make sure that we're sort of a consistent throughout all of that programme with them.
Thank you.
Sarah, I'm going to ping over to you for your question.
Hi, I just thought it was really interesting how we've seen quite a few people who submitted for this award that have a central green space, and I can see this again. But I think also the really important thing is those edges and connections to that green space, because people outside of that red line may not be aware of it or how it connects to it. And that's for people and for nature. And I was wondering what your sort of thoughts on and what your proposals are related to that.
I think that you've hit on the nail on the head, absolutely. So by pulling the park further into the site, it kind of pulled it away from the busy York Road, allowed us sort of created a sort of, if you like, a block that was kind of a suitable development size. But it also meant that the park was, if you like, touching more of the surrounding neighbourhoods, the neighbourhoods to the north and to the south, the Kambala Estate and the Winstanley Estate. They're actually quite difficult to penetrate. They don't necessarily have routes through themselves. So aligning as best we could our routes through, taking into account the services and that phasing strategy for rehousing, sought to kind of, if you like, extend the master plan beyond the red line and start to do works that would actually sort of take the park and draw it out through those connections, which are kind of reduced by the fact that the park is so central. And then, you know, ensuring that the alignments of routes through between the blocks would mean that anybody coming out of their estate to the north or the south, or from the riverside even more so, would get views through and sort of be, you know, attracted into the park. One of the sort of side projects we're trying to get to happen is the Falcon Estate, which is it's like a sort of gated community between Clapham Junction and the park, is meeting them to sort of see if we can demonstrate to them the benefits of opening up their gated community and actually allowing people to move through their little, rather lovely little development. And it's interesting that they sort of picked up pretty quickly that they've long thought themselves as sort of the good bit compared to the Winstanley estate. And now they're worried they're going to be the poor relation. And they also sort of see benefits to kind of connecting to the park themselves. So again, it's a bit, as Lucy says, it's that very long-term view. The initial master plan seeks to kind of draw in and push out as much we can, but we're also trying to kind of tap into other people's future aspirations to widen that as much as we can.
Well, I'm afraid that concludes this session. So I just have to thank you all for your presentation and your question feedback. Well done, Simon and Lucy. This is actually the last presentation as part of our first Future Place category. So we've heard from 6 visionary presentations from Manchester, Rainham, Bristol, North London, Aberdeen, and South London. The judges are going to make their deliberations right after this. And then we'll be back to announce which projects are going to win the coveted Golden Pineapple for Future Place. And that's on Friday, the 13th of November from 3:30 until 4:30. And we'll be back here tomorrow at 3:30 p.m. with 3 projects who are vying for the Pineapple for International Future Place. So thank you so much to our judges and to our presenters today. And thank you so much to the Design Council who have supported these awards since their inception and supported us with shaping some of the way that we approach this judging through their expertise in design review. And I'll see all of our audience in the social lounge, which is going to open immediately after this. And that's all. That concludes this session. Thanks a lot.